Hello, today is Monday, February 2nd. Welcome to episode 552 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the foreign policy and national security debates shaking up America. I'm Jamil Jaffer, NSI's founder and executive director, and I'm joined today by NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson and NSI senior fellows Morgan Vina and Matt Hayden. Thrilled to be with you guys. And actually, I'm going to hand it over to Les for the intro because he knows a lot more about our topic today. Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces, the Sudanese Armed Forces, the Emiratis, the Turks, the Egyptians. So Les, over to you for the intro.
Thanks, Jamil. Sudan is suffering from yet another civil war. The last 3 years or so, as you pointed out, the RSF has been fighting the SAF. These are two different factions of the Sudanese military. The SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces, supported on the outside by Egypt and Turkey. RSF, supported on the outside by the Emiratis and others. The news recently is that Egypt has a drone airport in western Egypt and is using those drones to attack RSF positions inside Sudan. This war has been going on for 3 years. Millions of people have been displaced. And while we don't really have great figures on casualties, somewhere on the order of 150,000 people have been killed. It is arguably the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world today. Gaza pales in comparison just in terms of lives lost and that kind of thing. Morgan, I want to go to you first. There's real implications here for both Africa and the Middle East. It does seem like Middle Eastern powers are lining up again on various sides of a civil war and using those forces as proxies against each other. What's your take?
Yeah, thanks, Les. Look, I think this is news because the New York Times came out with an article saying that there is a drone base in Egypt that's flying drones into Sudan. The fact that we are seeing these proxies involved in this conflict is not news, right? This has been going on for a very long time. Israel's actually involved. Let's not forget that Sudan was about to sign the Abraham Accords with Israel. And I'm sure that there was obviously a lot going on there behind the scenes. But what does this mean for like the United States? What are the implications here? And I think we can really point to the national security strategy in terms of summarizing what the United States' position is towards sub-Saharan Africa. So let's back up for a hot second, right? So coming into office, President Trump integrates U.S. aid into the State Department. That process is still being done. USAID, of course, was responsible for adjudicating the bulk of humanitarian assistance and foreign assistance going to Sudan, right? We also provided a significant portion of funding to the World Food Program, which fed a lot of these starving people affected by famine. That funding has been cut by over 40%, right? So what we're seeing here is a drastic reorganization of how the United States conducts foreign assistance and humanitarian assistance and how it's being sent over and adjudicated. In addition to that, we're seeing international organizations take a pay cut. Europe isn't filling that gap, right? WFP is taking a 50% pay cut, and that is directly affecting Sudan, right? Now, here's the thing, though. All of these moves are deliberate and intentional. The president's national security strategy outlines sort of the outright rejection of aid in favor of trade and foreign investment. His rapid reshaping of sort of how much the United States spends, he's very cognizant. President Trump and the administration are very cognizant that this is going to affect the lives of civilians on the ground and that people are likely to die because of it. That is a gamble that they are willing to take. And that is outlined very clearly in the national security strategy in terms of how they are prioritizing U.S. foreign assistance. So, ultimately, though, no matter how much aid and how many people die because of the lack of foreign assistance and food assistance that we were providing, none of that matters when it really comes to holding the people accountable for the conflict themselves. That is, the leaders of the RSF and the SAF here. They need to be held accountable. The United States can play a role in those negotiations, particularly given the role that our Middle Eastern partners, who we are very close to, and by the way, we have very close military partnerships with. So ultimately, I think we can provide leverage when it comes to the military to sort of diplomatic negotiations. But ultimately, it is the leaders themselves of Sudan who are responsible for killing their own people that should be held accountable.
Matt, what's your take on what this means for U.S. national security? We are a treaty ally of Turkey. We have a tremendously robust military relationship with Egypt. Our ties to the Emiratis are now in a variety of sectors, including financial, with key leaders of the Trump administration. We do a lot of things with them diplomatically. Do we have a problem here with what's going on in Sudan?
I don't think there's a partner we don't have a strategic relationship with. So every proxy is kind of our proxy at the same time. So it makes it a little delicate no matter how we take a look at it. I'll push back just a little bit on the USAID being the ultimate lifeline. One of the challenges that we saw across the pre-USAID over reduction or indexing is that you had a lot of people dying and a lot of conflict in the same zone. So it wasn't that bringing food to individuals in need was a bad thing to stop. It's that current efforts just weren't leading to success in a lot of different regions. So I do want to say that hopefully the modern approach to let's get everybody to play nice and get the national security elements aligned with economic drivers has a play here that directs some of this. But just from on my approach is we're also seeing where modern warfare is jumping into traditional Civil War conflict. When you start looking at the larger drones, when you start looking at Chinese-made equipment to monitor, disrupt, and attack spectrum at large, candidly, in a desert, that's where we're starting to see things that you wouldn't have seen 5-6 years ago. And it's letting people sharpen their pencils around where different technologies can be brought to bear. And it's no longer a series of supplying bullets and guns. Now it's a matter of a mesh of technologies that allow you to kind of project force and project dominance into certain regions that did not have it before. So we're going to see a lot of feedback similar to the way we see the tragedies across Ukraine and Russia, that these technologies are rapidly advancing. So from the United States perspective, we also have to be prepared as these types of weapon platforms get into hands of less than reputable actors. How do they get used against our partners and our more stable areas of the world? So the whole drone conflict thing really stands up on a dime and takes off and causes a lot of military strategies to get rewritten.
Jamil, is there an opportunity for China to expand its influence in the region here? Should we be worried about that? And if so, does that mean we have to play a greater role in trying to resolve this conflict?
Yeah, look, I think absolutely. When we were starting this conversation, I was trying to figure out why the Emiratis care about Sudan, right? Why should the U.S. care about it? Why should other nations? Why would nations like Russia and China care? And there are some fundamental aspects of Sudan that matter here, right? One, it's got a Red Sea coastline. The Red Sea is a critical port of entrance and exit from the Suez Canal. It's a key cut through for a huge amount of U.S. and worldwide shipping. So it's strategically important for that reason alone to a lot of the nation states that send shipping through that passage, right? The Suez Canal, the Red Sea, and the Med. You've also got the fact that it's downstream, or I guess upstream, downstream from on the Nile from Egypt, which is why Egypt cares. Sudan can actually help cut off the access to Nile River water if they decide to, given their positioning between the source of the Nile, which runs south to north, there. And then, of course, it's the access to the Sahel. And so Sudan is kind of centrally located in a place that really matters for a lot of different countries. And so China, yes. Russia, yes. And the U.S., yes. Emiratis, of course, they care about some of the gold, the other supplies that come from Sudan. And so there's a play here in Sudan that is bigger than one might think. And if you wonder why the U.S. was pouring all those resources into Sudan during the famine, it wasn't simply out of just, we're good-natured folks who want to help the poor, starving people of Sudan. There are strategic reasons for us to be engaged in that region, and strategic reasons for us to keep our adversaries, primarily Russia and China, out of the region. We've seen Russia operating with the Wagner Group in a variety of regions. They've been supporting some of the players in this conflict as well. That's part of the challenge. We got to get on the ball. It's true that the U.S. can't operate everywhere, but there are parts of the world that matter. Africa is a part of the world that we have not paid nearly enough attention to, and a part of the world that we should pay increasing attention to, even as we focus on our own home theater here with the Don Roe doctrine, and we deal with the Indo-Pacific and the continuing, never-ending fights in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So we gotta do it all, but we're a superpower. We can do that. We just have to decide we want to lead.
I'm going to point out that in Yemen, we've got the Emiratis and the Saudis on opposite sides of a civil war. That's a huge problem for us. As Iran gets pushed further into a corner and we see their influence in the region getting less and less, which overall is a good thing. These other conflicts are going to pop up. We're going to have to deal with them in a responsible way. Sudan is one of them. Yemen is one of them. This is not going to get easier. It might get harder. Jamil, bring us home.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks, as always, to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, the NSI staff, for the help producing today's episode. Thanks to Les for letting me jump in and take the lead on the intro and outro. Join us again on Wednesday, February 4th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're also on YouTube, so if you want to see Les on his cell phone, check out our channel for a video of today's episode. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.